I'm always ranting about gay relationships in the 21st century. And I told a friend of mine, I said, you know what? I bet you gay relationships in ancient times in Egypt was way better than today. Well, there's a guy, his name is Neil Laird. He wrote a book about gay life in ancient times. The name of his book is Prime Time Travelers. So he's going to be my guest today on this podcast. My name is Eric, and welcome to the craziness that lives inside my head. Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Neil Laird. I'm a gay filmmaker. I did 25 years of television documentaries for History Channel, A&E, long stint at Discovery Channel and Science Channel. Almost all of them based on ancient history. That's my thing, archaeology, history. And as a gay producer, I kind of came out in the field, which is his own story about what it's like to be gay in very strict Muslim societies, and I have to, kind of do that tightrope. But I just wrote my first book based on a lot of my experiences of being a young gay writer, a filmmaker coming out while I was shooting these films, but also too my great love of the ancient world. And one thing I learned making these films is how, in many ways, being gay was much better under ancient Rome and ancient Greece and ancient Egypt than it is now. There
Hmm.
clearly was, if you were a slave, you were a slave, and there were some awful things that happened. You probably all died at 30 of some disease because penicillin hadn't been invented yet. But in terms of homosexuality, in terms of relationships, in terms of what you could do and what you couldn't do, it was a vastly different world. And that's, I know you want to talk about that, so we can get
Yeah.
into that with
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the book is called Primetime Travelers, and it's out on Amazon right now. It's the first of a series, and all of them have gay lead characters, and they go in the ancient past, and they deal with gay culture and gay people,
Hmm.
and fall in love. The first one is in Egypt, and it's all about Jared coming out. The second book, which I just finished, comes out in August, and that's called Primetime Pompeii, and that goes back to ancient Rome and obviously the eruption of Pompeii in say 9 AD. And then Kara, who's the lesbian camwoman, she has a chance to fall in love. So it also deals with female roles
Yeah.
of sexuality as well. And then I'm going off to Turkey next month to write Primetime Troy, the third one. And we'll get
Okay.
into Achilles and Patroclus and all the gay icons of the Trojan War as well. So the gay themes are all through what is otherwise an Indiana Jones adventure story.
Okay. That's great.
Mhm.
So I was just curious when I read that that's what you were doing, and I was just wondering, the way the gay put it this way, gay male relationships are. Um, I was just wondering the comparison between gay male relationship back in Greece and Egypt, because it seems to me like I'm old, but I don't think
Not
gay.
that old. You will remember ancient Greece.
Well, well, I don't think gay men are capable of having what they call a monogamous relationship, which I always suspect that was a straight thing, not a gay thing. So I was wondering, well, did they have monogamous relationship back in the ancient days?
It certainly had marriage. Marriage was a very different uh, thing than it is now. There was not a legal framework. It wasn't like, you take a vow and you have to stick to them. The Romans had marriage, the Egyptians and the Greeks, there's no real evidence. They actually sat down and said, let's sign this and forever only yours. They also had a much more open looking at Greeks is a perfect example because the Greeks, had the whole culture of pederasty, if you know what that is.
No, I
And
don't.
pederasty, something was institutionalized, and pederasty was an older male and a younger boy.
Oh,
And it was
okay.
also very much a rite of passage. So it was, they had the key thing you got to think about all of these ancient cultures up until Christianity, that's when it all changed, was there was no word for gay. It didn't have a moniker. It wasn't like, oh, you're a queer or you're whatever. All the derogatory stuff you have today didn't exist because it was much more fluid. So you were expected to eventually settle down and have a family, but that necessarily didn't mean monogamy. It obviously meant just that you had to produce. So like in ancient Greece, pederasty was something that was institutionalized all the way back to the Trojan War and beyond, where essentially a young boy would be in service of another man who would tutor him, but also be sexual.
Mm.
And sometimes these became love affairs that lasted the rest of the ages, and sometimes they went off and got married. It wasn't clear if you're expected to get out of your system and then settle down and have a wife and kids, because it clearly wasn't. If you look at the vases, all you can do is walk through the Vet or the Met or the Louvre or whatever, and you see, oh, these seriously erotic vases, these gorgeous buff men just having anal sex 6 ways to Sunday. There's not a woman in sight. And they clearly idolize youth and beauty, and I think that's part of the reason why men didn't look at a boy as any different than a female. Not everybody would have to participate in it, but it was very much a very, very common thing. The oldest known reference we have of gays in the world is a wonderful tomb, one of my favorite tombs in Egypt, a place called Saqqara. If you ever see the step pyramid, it's 4,500 years old. It goes way, way back. And there's a tomb, they call it the Tomb of the Two Brothers, which is so homophobic. But what it is two gay dudes who were buried together when they died 4,500 years ago. And it is the most lovingly crafted tomb. These two men, nose to nose, looking at each other, which is the ancient Egyptian form of kissing, holding hands, fishing and cooking and just idling under the palm trees. And you'll see their wives and their kids very small in the background. So they're ticking that box. But these men, not only were they clearly in love, despite what modern archaeologists call two brothers, I know me and my brother don't react like that when we're together for the reunions, This was definitely two gay dudes. And they obviously, it was sanctioned by the pharaoh enough where they built this elite tomb together and they painted on the wall, which shows you that 4.5 millennia ago, it was perfectly fine to have a same-sex couple as well as having wife and kids on the side. At the end of the day, these two guys were the ones who were together, and the wife and the kids maybe were just to procreate and keep the bloodline alive.
And you just heard the craziness that lived. I was just telling you that what you just explained about Egypt, the two brothers, my very first gay boyfriend that I was in love with, we talked about buying a brownstone in Brooklyn. One of us is going to live upstairs, one of us is going to live downstairs. We're going to have our wives, we're going to have our kids. And then I said, and then what we're going to be doing? Of course, and I told him,
there'll be a secret passageway in the back.
But see, I grew up, I'm a Baptist. I grew up as a Baptist. No, you can't do that. I said, you can't do that. But then he said that he didn't want a gay relationship. He wanted a relationship with a guy, but he also wanted to be married and have kids.
Right.
Now, since I got older, I mean, in the last 10 years of my life, that's all I've been fooling around with, married men.
Well, look, as you say, we're all like, I'm a gay man. I'm in an open relationship with my husband. And because I do believe that, that's how gay men sort of function, is like, I think we see sex in a very different way than straight people. All my straight friends look at us enviously and say, oh, I wish I had your relationship, but Agnes would leave me like that. So it's got those different standards. And I do think because you're not passing on a bloodline, and because there's all that sense of it's more often for fun and not for love, which is unfortunate because it's not always true. I think another reason why I take it back to the ancient world, it wasn't that serious. It was just people just enjoying each other while they went on with the rest of their lives, or instead. One of my favorite stories, and I want to write another book about this when I finish the Trojan one, is a thing called a true story called the Sacred Band of Thebes. You ever heard of these people?
No.
Sacred Band of Thebes was ancient Greece, about 300 BC, just before Alexander the Great and Macedonia and all that stuff kind of swept away. And they were an elite force of military men, everyone gay and everyone with their partner. So they fought side by side by their man. And the idea was you would never run from battle. You would never shirk a fight. You would be there with your lover until victory or defeat. And this band of 300-400 gay men, all gay men, were like the toast of the town for about 60 years. They were winning battle after battle. You could not fucking take down the Sacred Band of Thebes. All men committed to one another. And even when they died, they finally got wiped out by Philip of Macedonia, Alexander the Great's father. And he recognized how much love these men had for themselves. Whether they had wives at home, we don't know. But he allowed them to be buried side by side, many linked up in arms, where they remained for over 2,000 years, 2,500 years, until they were found in 1960, the graves. It's a beautiful story of just gay men out there, and everybody knew they were gay, and ain't nobody calling them sissies. These guys would take you down.
Well, I mean, I don't know who told me this. I never learned it in school, but didn't Alexander the Great believed in having gay men because gay men would fight harder with their lover by their sides?
It's part of that thing. It comes out of the same context because mostly from the sacred band of Thebes, because Thebes is a town in ancient Greece on the mainland, and it was all city states then: Sparta, Athens, Thebes, and everybody wanted to be like the Thebans because, in many regards, these gay men they would go down, and they also argue they didn't have families at home; they just had each other. So all they were thinking about was their lover, who was right next to them in the heat of battle. And Alexander the Great too is very much well regarded homosexual. He had his boys that he took through all the way to India and back. And when they found when one of them died, he went to pieces because he was so much in love. And again, these are all things that we knew about. These were taught in ancient Rome and ancient Greece. They all knew about the gay. Achilles in the Trojan War had Patroclus. And if you ever read the Trojan War or the Iliad or seen the movie, the Brad Pitt movie, they whitewashed the gay there, unfortunately. But the whole thing is about losing his gay lover on the battlefield and refusing to fight. He became so angry that it was only after the death of his lover that he turned back on the Trojans and won the war. Gay love has been everywhere in the past, and it wasn't shunned, it wasn't dismissed, it wasn't swept under the rug. What happened was Christianity.
Yeah.
The moral of Christianity in the 4th, 5th century, and they saw it as perverted and decadent, and in many ways still do. As a Catholic, I'm a fallen Catholic, so I certainly heard that shit growing up from the Pope. And so that's really what turned the world against homosexuality as being something that's natural.
My cousin, she called me the other day. I think she says to me the United States government is making it if there's a war, it's mandatory that women got to fight in war.
Where is this?
True? She claims she heard it somewhere. If we go to war, the government is making it mandatory that women has to fight in the war.
Well, in a way, I guess you could argue. One of my female friends would say, "Why not? We're just as capable as you." So much of that stuff now is being done with drones and hiding behind a bunker somewhere, and you don't have to worry about muscle. All you got to do is know what press the red button instead of the green button. Yeah. Any gender can do that.
Yeah, but I think she didn't. She was upset about the fact that
she didn't want to go. Well, back in the day too, it's like I'm 58. Younger than you, but still old enough to remember a time where, if you were gay, you got chucked out of the military. They wouldn't take you. If you wanted to get out, I had an uncle or somebody, I forget who it was, someone in the family who didn't want to go to Vietnam. So he lied and he said he was gay and he got like his buddy to show up as his boyfriend or something. He did something to get out of it. And that was enough to say, oh, you're not strong enough to fight in Vietnam. You can stay at home. Yeah. So clearly, you be careful what you ask for.
Yeah. I had a friend who told me that he got drafted and he said he told that he was gay. They didn't believe him. So I forgot what he did. He did something gay just to get
something
just to get out.
That could be any manner of things.
Yeah. Because he said they didn't believe you right away because it was a war going on, it was the Vietnam War. So everybody was going to say they're gay, because they didn't want to go. So they didn't, you had to prove it.
Well, probably most of us, not in the age of, OnlyFans and online, we can all prove it. We all know a video trail. Back in 1969, it might have been a very different beast. Yeah. And it probably was an easy out. But again, once again, the reason I love the ancient world, among many other things, is that people like to think that history is a trajectory always going higher, that we're always getting better, that things are always better now than they were 10, 20 years ago. We certainly know that with the politics out there today, that's not true. But even you go all the way back, starting with social stuff like who you love and how you love and how you want to do it, things were better then. Things were much better 2,000 years ago than they are now.
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. I've heard people complain about, oh, the 60s or 70s were better than, I I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean,
That's probably nostalgia talking, and there's probably nostalgia me looking back in ancient Greece, and I mean, I'll go back and say, holy shit, it's so fucking dirty and filthy. Why did I love
yeah,
that?
yeah.
I'll get some dysentery on day one. So a lot of it's romance and nostalgia for something that's gone. Like someone who remembers their youth in the 60s is
Yeah.
looking back and saying things are better then. But certainly gays. No, I mean, look, I'm married. I'm married to, when I met my boyfriend in 1999, we didn't expect to get married. And then in 2013, when it became legal, we did. We figured, well, all these people fought in Albany for it. They did it for us. So many people crossed the party line, and some Republicans lost re-election because they realized it was the right thing to do. Who the hell are we not to get married? It wasn't something that we expected, but again, it shows you that is progress. Some things are better.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna tell you about my 90-year-old grandmother. We had a family reunion. My cousin said, "Oh, Granny, I guess you missed the good old days." She kept saying, "You missed the good old days." My grandmother said, "No, I don't miss the good old days." She said, "I like Walmart because she grew up on a farm. You don't want to be bothered." She said, "You got to cut wood. You got to." She said, "No, I don't like all that. I like Walmart."
Yeah, well, exactly. My husband's black too, and his family came from the South. And you talk to them about our times better. It's like, well, yeah, we have more freedoms, but I don't want to live in some shack somewhere in middle Mississippi
Yeah, yeah.
where it's going to fall over, and the white folk not looking at us when they drive down the street. So clearly, times have gotten better in some regard. It's all relative. I
Yeah.
do think with sexuality, it's fascinating too. It also frames the position you are. The one thing in ancient Greece and particularly Rome was, as long as you're a top, you could do anything.
Ah,
There would be a stigma if you were the passive bottom.
yeah.
And a lot of people don't talk about it. You assume that a lot of these guys were doing it both, or they like
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
position. But there was the only stigma attached to gay sex back in the day in the military, or if you're centurion, or if you're that kind of thing, is to be the passive partner. You
Mm.
can fuck anything you want, the moves, and it doesn't matter. No one would judge you. But if you submit yourself to another man, that came sometimes with a stereotype. So a lot of that stuff you don't hear about when you talk about Roman literature or things like that, or if they want to make fun of Julius Caesar, for example. No one really knows if he was gay, but there was old rumors that he was the bottom for some Turkish king or something, and he fell in love. And it's probably political stuff saying, oh, look, Julius Caesar, look where he takes it. It could have been used on a campaign float, who knows? But that was about the only thing that you could somehow be criticized for back then in terms of sex.
Mm. Well, I remember talking about Adam from Adam. I mean, some top guy put on put on in his profile, he wanted another top guy because he likes to make tops bottom.
Good luck with that. Good luck. We also know that most people who say they're tops are just lying. You get them in the
Oh
room,
yeah,
something else comes out.
yeah,
Because that's all the machismo. So again, yeah, nothing's really changed, right? It's like, I'm not going to submit. I won't tell you that until we're naked and the lights are off. What I really like,
yeah.
but I'm not anymore. So yeah, so that stereotype still persists. But
Well, that's like my experience with these married men, I'm thinking, you get them in bed, I'm like, they turn on their stomach and said, I didn't bring you here for you to turn on your stomach. I'm supposed to turn on my stomach.
well, in
So
a way,
now
you
I gotta
get it.
do all the work.
When they're back with their wife, that's all they can do. Now
Yeah.
they get a chance to turn their stomach for a change. So it's kind of like, they expect the things they can't get, on 123 Mulberry Lane out in the burbs.
Yeah.
It's
But
like,
I told but that's a lot of work for
do
me. That's a
you
lot of
even know what
work.
you that's exactly, do you even know what you're getting into, sir, when you take this position? Yeah. There's a learning curve about this position.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was good talking to you.
Yeah, is there anything else that, I think, yeah, but the bottom line is kind of like history marches forward, and sometimes it marches in place, sometimes it goes back. In terms with sexuality, in many regards, you could have a freer, more open lifestyle. as a male. Female is a different story. As back in the ancient world as you can now, which is a great shame, you know. So when we think about all these leaps that we're doing with gay marriage and these leaps we're doing with being able to hold your husband's hand or your boyfriend's hand or go on a cruise, that's progress compared to 1950, but not compared to 50 AD, where people were doing all that stuff in the open and no one even batted an eye. So it's fascinating how sexuality has changed up and down depending on the mores of who's in charge.
You know, my grandmother says something, it wasn't gay, but it was something else about um, blasphemy. She said that God's going to get that's blasphemy. And I got mad and I said, well, let me tell you something. If God didn't want me to be who I am or think what I think, he wouldn't put it in my head. And that's how I look at life.
Yeah.
I mean, he created, if he didn't want it, then somebody said, well, it's free will. So why are you going to give some, that's like have if you're going to give somebody free will, then you got to accept whatever that will is.
Exactly. If you make gay sex so freaking good, then you got to figure that God had a plan to say, okay, it was like he put pixie dust on this and said, okay, this is all right, you know. If it was so evil, it would be awful.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, but you know what the church said. If it's that feels that good is.
Of course, good is evil. You're right. I mean, and that's sort of like how they turn the tables on it. Like anything that you can enjoy, anything that's sort of self-satisfying is somehow.
I know it's just ridiculous.
That is so good. And the argument for your grandmothers, well, then why did God give us these desires and these gifts and these wants? Because it's like if he's testing us, then it's like, what's the test? Be miserable.
But it doesn't make any sense. If he knows everything, then he knows I failed the test. So I'm moving.
Exactly. He knows long before I log on to Grindr. He knows where I'm going.
All right, but it's good talking to you. And you just heard the craziness that lives inside my head.